The security guard's hand slammed against my chest, pushing me back from the gleaming glass doors of Meridian Tech Solutions. I told you, buddy, no solicitors, no homeless people, and definitely no janitors wandering around after hours. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was wearing a faded blue jumpsuit with Pete embroidered on the chest. My hair was deliberately unkempt, and I carried a mop bucket that had seen better days. What he didn't know was that I owned the building he was throwing me out of. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm the 34-year-old founder and CEO of this $50 million software company. But tonight, I wasn't Marcus Chen. I was Pete, the janitor, a role I'd been playing for 3 months to uncover something that was slowly destroying everything I'd built. You see, someone in my company was stealing from me. Not just money, though there was plenty of that missing, but trade secrets, client lists, and proprietary code that represented years of my life's work. The betrayal cut deep because I suspected it was someone I trusted completely. Someone who had access to everything. Someone in my inner circle. So I did what any desperate CEO would do. I faked my own temporary departure, hired a management consultant to run things while I was supposedly in Silicon Valley raising capital, and infiltrated my own company as night shift cleaning staff. For 3 months, I mopped floors, emptied trash cans, and listened. What I discovered would shatter not just my business, but my faith in the people I'd considered family. The plan was simple. Catch the thief red-handed at tonight's company celebration, our 5th anniversary party that I was supposed to be attending via video call from California. Instead, I'd be there in person, invisible in plain sight, ready to expose the truth. What I didn't expect was that the truth would be more devastating than any theft could ever be. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, I learned early that trust was both precious and fragile. My parents, David and Linda Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in the 80s with nothing but engineering degrees and unshakable faith in the American dream. Dad worked at Ford's engine plant while Mom taught math at the local high school. They saved every penny for my future, constantly reminding me that education and hard work were the only paths to success. But success, I discovered, came with its own set of problems. When I was 12, I won the regional science fair with a rudimentary computer program that could predict weather patterns. My parents were so proud they invited every relative, neighbor, and family friend to our house for a celebration dinner. I remember standing in our cramped living room, surrounded by faces beaming with approval, when my Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother who'd struggled with a series of failed businesses, pulled me aside. "You know, Marcus," he said, his breath smelling of the beer he'd been nursing all evening, "success makes people jealous. Even family. Remember that when you get older." At the time, I thought he was just bitter about his own failures. I had no idea how prophetic his words would be. The second incident happened during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, and my parents threw another celebration, this one even bigger. The whole Taiwanese American community in Cleveland seemed to be crammed into our house, eating Mom's dumplings and praising my achievements. But I overheard a conversation between 2 of Mom's friends in the kitchen. "Linda's boy is smart, but he'll probably forget where he came from when he gets rich," one whispered. "These American-educated kids, they think they're too good for their families." "Mark my words," the other replied, "success will change him. It always does." Those words haunted me throughout college and when I started Meridian Tech at 26. I was determined to prove them wrong. I surrounded myself with people I trusted, college friends, former colleagues, and yes, family members. When my cousin James graduated from business school, I hired him as my CFO. When my college roommate Tom needed a job, he became my head of sales. My girlfriend Sarah from MIT joined as our lead developer. This wasn't just business. It was my chosen family. We worked 18-hour days together, shared pizza at midnight, and celebrated every small victory like it was the Super Bowl. When we landed our first $1 million client, I took everyone to Vegas. When we hit 10 million in revenue, I bought each core team member a Rolex. I thought loyalty was something you earned through generosity and shared success. The grand gesture I'd been planning was the ultimate expression of this philosophy. For our 5th anniversary, I was ready to announce profit-sharing bonuses that would make everyone millionaires. I'd spent months working with lawyers to structure it properly, wanting to surprise the team at tonight's celebration. It was going to be my way of saying, we built this together, and we'll all prosper together. But 3 months ago, I discovered the secret that changed everything. A routine audit revealed irregularities, missing funds, unauthorized access to client accounts, and worst of all, our proprietary AI algorithm had somehow ended up in the hands of our biggest competitor. The theft was sophisticated, requiring insider knowledge and high-level access credentials. The betrayal felt personal because it was personal. Someone I'd trusted with everything, someone I'd enriched, celebrated, and considered family, was systematically destroying the company we'd built together. The question wasn't just who, but why. And as I'd learned playing Janitor Pete for 3 months, the why was often more devastating than the who. Comment below and let me know where you're watching this from. I'd love to know how far this story travels and whether you've ever had your trust betrayed by someone close to you. The Meridian Tech 5th anniversary party was being held at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, with a view of Lake Erie that sparkled under the October evening lights. As Pete the janitor, I'd arrived 3 hours early through the service entrance, my mop bucket and cleaning cart providing perfect cover. The event staff barely glanced at me, invisible labor, just another part of the background. I positioned myself in the adjacent conference room where I could monitor everything through the connecting doors. My earpiece was tuned to the building's security frequency, and I'd planted tiny cameras in strategic locations over the past month during my cleaning rounds. Tonight would either vindicate my suspicions or prove me completely paranoid. The first guests arrived at 6 sharp. I watched through the crack in the door as my team filed in, all dressed to the nines. There was James, my cousin and CFO, looking sharp in his custom-tailored suit, the same one I'd helped him pick out last Christmas. Sarah walked in wearing a stunning red dress, her arm linked with Tom's. They'd started dating 6 months ago, which had initially made me happy. Office romance can be complicated, but they seemed good for each other. The energy in the room was electric. Everyone believed I was video calling in from San Francisco at 8 o'clock to make a major announcement about the company's future. What they didn't know was that I'd already discovered the announcement they were expecting wasn't the one I'd planned to give. As Pete, I'd overheard fragments of conversations over the past 3 months. Hushed phone calls in empty offices. Encrypted files being transferred after hours. Meetings that mysteriously ended when I entered rooms to empty trash cans. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, an undercurrent of anticipation that went beyond normal celebration. I watched James work the room, shaking hands and playing the perfect host in my absence. He'd always been good at that. The schmoozing, the politics, the glad-handing that made clients feel important. But something about his body language tonight seemed off. His laugh was too loud, his gestures too animated. He kept checking his phone and glancing toward the main entrance. That's when I noticed the stranger. A woman I'd never seen before entered at 7:15, scanning the room with the calculated gaze of someone who didn't belong but was trying to blend in. She was well-dressed, professional, carrying a leather portfolio that screamed, serious business. James immediately moved toward her, and they exchanged what looked like a brief, tense conversation near the bar. My blood ran cold as pieces started falling into place. This wasn't just internal theft, this was corporate espionage, and tonight was the handoff. I grabbed my cleaning cart and wheeled it closer to their location, pretending to wipe down tables. Through my earpiece, I could hear the security guard at the front desk. Rodriguez from Pinnacle Solutions is here for the Chen celebration. Pinnacle Solutions. Our biggest competitor. The company that had somehow acquired our proprietary AI algorithm and used it to undercut 3 of our major bids this year. The woman does. Rodriguez handed James a small envelope. He slipped it into his jacket pocket without looking at it, then guided her toward a quieter corner of the room. I maneuvered my cart to stay within earshot, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The final transfer happens at 8:30, right after his video call, James was saying. By the time he figures out what's happened, we'll have everything we need to launch our own platform. And you're sure he suspects nothing? Rodriguez asked. Marcus? please. He's too trusting for his own good. Always has been. He still thinks loyalty means something in business. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just theft, this was a coordinated betrayal by someone I'd considered a brother. Someone whose business school loans I'd helped pay off. Someone who'd been best man at my parents' anniversary celebration just 6 months ago. But it got worse. Tom appeared at their side, and I realized he was part of this too. Sarah's got the final code packages ready, he whispered. She's just waiting for the signal. Sarah. My Sarah. The woman I'd been planning to propose to next month. The brilliant developer who'd helped me build the core architecture of everything we'd created. I felt the world tilting underneath me. This wasn't just a business betrayal, this was personal destruction on every level. My company, my family, my relationship, all of it built on lies. The stranger exchanged knowing looks with both men before melting back into the crowd. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed and a large screen descended from the ceiling for my video call from California. James stepped up to the microphone, his smile perfectly practiced. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our fearless leader, Marcus Chen, calling in from Silicon Valley with some exciting news about Meridian's future. The crowd applauded as a pre-recorded video I'd made weeks ago began playing on the screen. I watched myself talking about growth, opportunity, and the importance of trust in building something meaningful. The irony was nauseating. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. We're trying to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Now back to how this night changed my life forever. As my recorded image spoke about loyalty and shared success, I saw James check his phone again. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever final piece of theft was planned for 8:30, I wasn't going to let it happen. It was time for Pete the janitor to die, and for Marcus Chen to be reborn. At 8:25, as my pre-recorded video was wrapping up with promises of exciting announcements, I made my decision. I stripped off the janitor's jumpsuit in the service hallway, revealing the sharp black suit I'd worn underneath. I'd planned for this moment, hoping I'd never need it. My hands shook as I straightened my tie and ran fingers through my hair. In 5 minutes, I'd either save my company or watch it burn down with my relationships inside it. But there was no choice now. I'd heard enough to know that by 8:30, everything I'd built would be gone. I walked through the main entrance of the ballroom just as my recorded message was ending with, "And I can't wait to celebrate with you all in person very soon." The timing was perfect and the timing was terrible. The room fell silent. 120 people turned to stare at me, their faces cycling through confusion, recognition, and shock. Someone dropped a champagne glass, and the sound of it shattering echoed like a gunshot. "Sorry I'm late to my own party," I said, my voice carrying across the stunned silence. Traffic from the airport was murder. James went white as a sheet. Tom took a step backward, knocking into a cocktail table. But it was Sarah's face that broke my heart, the immediate guilt that flashed across her features before she tried to mask it with surprise. "Marcus," she whispered, "but you're in California. How are you?" "Funny thing about video technology," I said, walking deeper into the room as conversations stopped and all eyes followed me. "You can record messages ahead of time. Gives you the freedom to be other places. Like here. Like watching." I could see James calculating, his mind racing to figure out how much I knew and how much damage control was possible. He forced a smile and spread his arms wide. "Marcus, this is incredible. What a surprise. You should have told us you were coming back for what, James? For the celebration? Or for the 8:30 transfer to Pinnacle Solutions?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched the color drain from faces around the room as people began to understand that something was very, very wrong. "I don't know what you're talking about," James said, but his voice cracked on the last word. "Really? Then you won't mind emptying your jacket pocket. The envelope Ms. Rodriguez gave you 20 minutes ago." James's hand instinctively moved to his pocket, then stopped. In that gesture, everyone in the room could see his guilt. "For 3 months, I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear, "I've been Pete the janitor. Emptying your trash cans, cleaning your offices, listening to your phone calls. It's amazing what people say when they think the help is invisible. I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording, James's voice saying, "By the time he figures out what's happened, we'll have everything we need to launch our own platform." The gasp from the crowd was audible. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, tears already starting to flow. Tom looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "Marcus, let me explain," Sarah started, but I held up a hand. "Explain what?" "How you've been copying our source code. How you've been selling our client lists. How you've been planning to gut this company and hand it over to our competitors." My voice was rising now, 5 years of trust and betrayal pouring out. "Or maybe you want to explain how you've been lying to my face every single day while planning to destroy everything we built together? You don't understand the pressure we were under." Tom suddenly burst out. "Do you know what it's like working for someone who has everything? Who makes all the decisions and gets all the credit? We built this company too." "So you decided to steal it," I said flatly. "We decided to finally get what we deserved." James shot back, his composure finally cracking. "You with your profit-sharing promises and your 'we're all family' speeches. But who owns the patents? Who has their name on the building? Who gets written up in Forbes while the rest of us are just key employees?" The raw resentment in his voice was like a slap. This wasn't just about money, this was about jealousy and entitlement that had been festering for years. "So tonight was what? Your graduation ceremony?" I asked. Sarah was sobbing now, but she managed to speak through her tears. "We were going to tell you. After we launched our own company, we were going to offer you a partnership position." "How generous," I said, the sarcasm cutting through the room like a blade. "Steal my company and then offer me a job in my own creation." I looked around the room at faces I'd known for years, employees who'd benefited from my trust, my generosity, my belief in building something together. Some looked shocked and disgusted by what they were hearing. Others looked uncomfortable, like maybe they'd suspected something. A few looked guilty, and I realized this conspiracy might be bigger than I'd thought. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady now. "Security is already outside. The FBI's cybercrimes unit has been briefed and is waiting for my call. You three have exactly 1 minute to decide if you want to try to explain this to prosecutors, or if you want to walk out of here now and disappear from my life forever." "You're bluffing," James said, but his voice shook. "Pete the janitor heard everything. Pete the janitor recorded everything. Pete the janitor collected evidence for 3 months. You want to test whether I'm bluffing?" The fight went out of them all at once. James's shoulders sagged, Tom's hands were shaking, and Sarah was crying so hard she could barely stand. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "How was it supposed to happen, Sarah? What version of betraying someone you claimed to love was supposed to feel better?" She had no answer. I watched the 3 people I trusted most in the world walk toward the exit, their heads down, their plans in ruins. James paused at the door and turned back. "You know what, Marcus? You want to know the truth? You're a control freak who thinks loyalty can be bought. Maybe this will teach you that trust is earned, not purchased." And then they were gone, leaving me standing in front of a room full of employees, my family's chosen gathering, everything I'd built suddenly feeling hollow and strange. The silence stretched until someone in the back of the room started clapping. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, not for me, but for the courage it had taken to expose the truth. But all I felt was empty. The next morning, I sat in my real office for the first time in 3 months, staring at legal documents spread across my desk like pieces of a shattered life. The betrayal had cut deeper than I'd imagined possible, but the aftermath was proving even more complicated. My lawyer, Patricia Williams, had arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and a grim expression. "The good news is we can prove everything: corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, breach of fiduciary duty. The bad news is that 3 of your key executives just walked away with intimate knowledge of your entire operation. Can we stop them legally?" Non-compete clauses will help, but James was smart about the timing. Most of your intellectual property was already compromised. We're looking at years of litigation to recover damages, and by then, she shrugged. You know how fast this industry moves. The phone had been ringing all morning. Word travels fast in Cleveland's tech community, and the story of the CEO who caught his own executives stealing by posing as a janitor was already making rounds on industry blogs. Some calls were supportive, clients reassuring me of their loyalty, competitors expressing shock at the betrayal. Others were more concerning, investors wanting emergency meetings, board members demanding explanations. But the call that mattered most came at 10:15. My assistant buzzed in. Marcus, there's a Linda Rodriguez on line 3. She says it's urgent. Please. The Pinnacle Solutions contact who'd met with James last night. My hand hesitated over the phone before I picked up. Mr. Chen? This is Linda Rodriguez, VP of Development at Pinnacle Solutions. I think we need to talk. If you're calling to gloat, I'm calling to warn you, she interrupted, and to apologize. What happened last night, that wasn't authorized by our executive team. The conversation that followed turned my understanding of the situation completely upside down. Rodriguez explained that James had approached Pinnacle 6 months ago, claiming to represent a disaffected group within Meridian who wanted to defect. He'd been selling information piecemeal, positioning it as legitimate competitive intelligence from willing sources. We thought we were dealing with employees who wanted to jump ship, Rodriguez said. Industrial espionage isn't our business model. When I realized last night that this was theft from an unwilling CO, I went straight to my boss. We're prepared to return everything we received and testify against your former executives. The unexpected alliance with Pinnacle became the first piece of good news in a very dark period. But it also revealed how much deeper the conspiracy had gone. James hadn't just been stealing, he'd been systematically building a case for mass defection, planning to gut my entire development team. The real scope became clear when I called an all-hands meeting that afternoon. Out of 68 employees, 47 showed up. 21 had submitted resignations that morning, apparently having been recruited by James over the past months. My head of HR handed me a stack of resignation letters, many citing philosophical differences with company direction and seeking new opportunities for growth. The ones who stayed, my HR director said quietly, they're the ones who were never approached, or the ones who refused to participate. Standing in front of the employees who'd remained loyal, I felt a mixture of gratitude and devastation. These people had chosen to stay not because they hadn't been given options, but because they believed in what we were building together. I won't lie to you, I told them. The next few months are going to be brutal. We're losing institutional knowledge, client relationships, and development capacity. Some of you might lose your jobs if we can't rebuild fast enough. Anyone who wants to leave now can go with my blessing and a positive reference. Nobody moved. Why are you staying? I asked. Maria, one of our junior developers, raised her hand. Because you just spent 3 months mopping floors to protect this company. Because when you caught people stealing from you, you gave them a chance to leave quietly instead of destroying their lives. Because you're still talking about instead of I. That's when I made the decision that would reshape everything. The profit-sharing plan I was going to announce last night? It's still happening. Actually, it's expanding. Everyone in this room just became a shareholder. Not because I'm generous, but because you've proven that ownership means more than just signing paychecks. We're going to rebuild this company, and we're going to do it as partners. The cheers that erupted felt different from the applause last night, not celebration of drama, but genuine excitement about possibility. But the most unexpected twist was still coming. 3 days later, Sarah called. Not to apologize again, but to reveal something that changed my entire understanding of what had happened. She was crying before she even spoke. Marcus, I need to tell you something about why we did this. James has been blackmailing me for 8 months. The story came out in pieces over a 2-hour conversation. Sarah had made a coding error 2 years ago that had temporarily exposed client data. Nothing malicious, just a mistake that we'd quickly fixed and never reported because no damage was done. James had discovered evidence of the error and used it to manipulate Sarah into participating in his scheme. He said if I didn't help him, he'd report the data breach to clients and regulators. He said it would destroy my career and put you in legal jeopardy for covering it up. I thought I was protecting you by helping him steal from you. Her voice broke completely. I know how insane that sounds. It explained so much: Sarah's obvious guilt last night, her participation despite clearly not wanting to be there, the tears that seemed disproportionate to simple greed. She'd been trapped in an impossible situation, making terrible choices to protect both of us from something that wasn't even really a threat. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Because I was afraid you'd hate me for the original mistake. Because James convinced me that you'd choose the company over me if you had to pick. Because I was stupid and scared and I made everything worse by trying to handle it alone. The revelation didn't excuse the betrayal, but it reframed it completely. Sarah wasn't a co-conspirator, she was another victim of James's manipulation. Tom, it turned out, had been similarly pressured through fake evidence that suggested he'd been padding his expense accounts. James hadn't just stolen from the company, he'd weaponized trust and fear to turn people against each other and against me. The betrayal was worse than I'd thought, but it was also different than I'd thought. The question now was what to do with that knowledge, and whether forgiveness was possible when the betrayal came from fear instead of greed. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same office, but everything has changed. The view of Lake Erie is the same, but the company looking out at it is fundamentally different, smaller in some ways, stronger in others, and built on a foundation that I finally understand. Meridian Tech survived, but barely. We lost 30% of our revenue in the immediate aftermath as clients worried about stability. We had to delay 3 major product launches while rebuilding our development team. There were weeks when I wasn't sure we'd make payroll, and nights when I questioned whether the whole thing was worth saving. But something remarkable happened during those dark months. The employees who stayed didn't just work harder, they worked differently. Without the toxic undercurrent of resentment and manipulation that James had fostered, people started actually collaborating instead of competing. Ideas flowed freely because nobody was worried about credit or positioning. The company became what I'd always claimed it was but had never actually achieved: a real partnership. Sarah and I had a series of painful conversations over those months. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal quickly or completely. We couldn't go back to what we had before, but we slowly built something new, a professional relationship based on honesty instead of assumption, boundaries instead of blind faith. She's still with the company, leading our new cybersecurity division, but we're not together romantically. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt in their original form. Tom chose a different path. After the truth about James's manipulation came out, he asked for a second chance. But the damage to our working relationship was too deep. I gave him a positive reference and helped him land a position with a startup in Austin. Sometimes forgiveness means letting people find their fresh start somewhere else. James, predictably, tried to sue me for wrongful termination and violation of privacy rights. His lawyer quickly discovered that recording conversations in a workplace you own about theft of your own property is perfectly legal in Ohio. The lawsuit was dismissed, and James disappeared from Cleveland's tech scene entirely. I heard through mutual contacts that he moved to Phoenix and is selling real estate now. The most unexpected outcome was my relationship with my employees. The shared ownership structure I'd implemented wasn't just a financial decision, it fundamentally changed how decisions got made. Instead of me making pronouncements from the executive suite, we developed collaborative processes where everyone had skin in the game. It was messy and took longer, but the solutions we created were better and more sustainable. Last month, we celebrated a milestone I hadn't dared hope for 6 months ago. Our revenue finally exceeded pre-betrayal levels. But more importantly, our employee satisfaction scores were the highest they'd ever been. When you give people actual ownership, not just profit-sharing promises, they stop thinking like employees and start thinking like entrepreneurs. The experience taught me something fundamental about trust that I'd never understood before. I used to think trust was binary, you either trusted someone completely or you didn't trust them at all. But real trust is more complex than that. It's about creating systems where good people can succeed and bad people can't hide. It's about transparency instead of faith, accountability instead of assumption. I also learned that success can indeed make people jealous, just like Uncle Robert warned me when I was 12. But jealousy only becomes destructive when it's allowed to fester in darkness. The solution isn't to be less successful or less generous. It's to be more transparent about how success is created and shared. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone building something meaningful, it's this. Pay attention to the people who have the most access to destroy what you've built. Not because you should be paranoid, but because you should be intentional about creating accountability systems that make betrayal both difficult and unnecessary. The janitor experiment taught me that sometimes you have to be willing to see yourself and your organization from the bottom up to understand what's really happening at the top. It's humbling to realize how much you can miss when you're insulated by success and surrounded by people who have reasons to tell you what you want to hear. Today, Meridian Tech is smaller but stronger, more careful but not more cynical, more successful but less naive. We have systems in place to prevent the kind of systematic theft that almost destroyed us, but more importantly, we have a culture that makes such theft unnecessary in the first place. I still think about that night at the Ritz-Carlton sometimes, the moment when everything I thought I knew about loyalty and trust shattered in front of a room full of people. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but it was also the moment I stopped being a boss and started being a leader. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals force you to build something better than what was betrayed. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you actually need. And sometimes, the janitor knows more about what's really happening in the building than the person whose name is on the door. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with trust, betrayal, and rebuilding in the comments below. Have you ever had to question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you? How did you rebuild after that kind of devastation? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, entrepreneurship, and the complicated reality of building something meaningful in a world where not everyone has your best interests at heart. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode, and remember, sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from the ground up, not the top down. Until next time, keep building, keep questioning, and keep trusting, but trust wisely.